Well, hey everyone, it's Ann O'Neill, a former academic and athletic All American from Iowa State University in women's basketball. I am the host of the Get Busy Living podcast, and you are listening to the Shadows podcast.
What does freedom mean to you, and why does that matter? I am Jay Lee, host of the Live Free series, and to answer those questions, we are going on a journey with people from all walks of life to discover what it takes to overcome the most significant obstacle on our path, which is our own mind and mindset, and turn it into our greatest asset on our journey to freedom. So join me on the Live Free series as we go on a mission to eradicate enslaved mindsets and to foster freedom.
All right, I want to welcome everyone to a special episode of The Shadows Podcast, one of our Rebound episodes. I have been so excited to actually hit the record button for this episode for quite some time. I'm being joined today by legendary head coach Dale Brown. He's former coach from Louisiana State University for 25 years. He led LSU to the 1981 and 86 Final Four. He's a four-time SEC Coach of the Year. He recently had the court named after him. And he's nicknamed the Master Motivator. Sir, welcome.
Trip, it's a pleasure to visit with you.
We got on a phone call a couple of weeks back. I think we talked for about 2 hours. Your wife had to drag you away to go eat your salmon.
Jeez, I know.
But it was an awesome experience for me. So let our listeners know where you located at right now.
I'm sorry?
Where are you located at right now?
Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
All right, so you are right in the heart of LSU country.
50 years we've been there now.
Wow, 50 years. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about your career, because you had an amazing career. How did you get hired as head coach of LSU?
That's a complex question to answer without taking up the entire half an hour we're going to be on. But I really enjoyed high school coaching. However, what I didn't enjoy was the principal or the superintendent coming up to you the day before school started, 2 days, and say the chemistry teacher's sick and is going to take sick leave this year, so you're going to have to teach chemistry. Hold on. I don't even know how to light a Bunsen burner. Well, that's okay. Just teach it. So many of the classes you were stuck in as a teacher, I would only be able to be a chapter ahead of the kids because I didn't know chemistry didn't interest me at all. Yeah. I was interested in teaching things that I think I could, such as a positive thinking course. When they put you in driver's education, well, Denny the dimwit could teach driver's education, and Denny the dimwit did me. So I told my wife, I love high school coaching. I don't need to be a college coach, but I don't want to be teaching courses that's not in my specialty. And that shows a weakness in the educational system we have in this country. And that's why we're doing so bad compared to other countries. So I sat down, I wrote letters. I should say my wife typed up letters to different places that we would like to maybe be a graduate assistant, be an assistant coach, work my way up, and probably sent out 100 letters. There were only 2 coaches that were courteous enough to even answer. Not that they I'm not saying they had to answer and say they're looking for a job or are you interested in one, but just to say, thank you, there is no job. Well, 2 of those, one of them was John Bennington at Michigan State, and the other was Liddell Anderson at Utah State. And I really, really appreciated that. And they both said that at the present time, they do not have a position, but they certainly liked my letter and my philosophy of what I wanted to do. They'd be in touch with me. Well, about a year later, the head coach at Utah State called me, and I met with him, and he gave me the job. So when I used to apply for jobs, they would say, well, what's your reference? My reference is I'm a junior high school and high school coach. I say, who do you want me to get the reference from? The janitor at the school? I don't have any references. So I was very fortunate to start out as an assistant at Utah State in college.
And then you went to Washington State, right?
Washington State for a year and LSU for 25.
So when you got to LSU, you replaced Press Maravich.
Press Maravich, correct.
What was your relationship like with him and Pete?
Press had been fired, and Pete, I believe, had been suspended from school for some problem. And so there really wasn't any relationship. So I wrote them both a letter and told them that I feel bad I'm inheriting this job under these conditions, but I would never bother them or anything, but they're always welcome, and I'd like to have an opportunity to bring them back into the fold. Well, his dad and him did. I had a deal at halftime for him, and I became an acquaintance of his dad, but I became a pretty good friend of Pete. And he was a remarkable guy. Forget his basketball, just his life in general, how he changed from the rogue he was to the man he was, gives us all hope. And I think Oscar Wilde, the great playwright, described us all perfectly on this earth. He said, every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. And Pete became a tremendously wonderful human being.
And so you replace Press Maravich, you become head coach. You had a winning record your first season at LSU. You were voted the SEC Coach of the Year. You are 14-10. You also beat Memphis State, who went on to become runner-up that year. When did you know you had something special going at LSU?
I knew it. That's a good question. I'm not sure anybody ever asked me that, but I knew it from watching practice. I learned as a young coach that players don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
And when they know that you're just not using them as a tool to improve yourself or keep your job. Well, these young kids, the very first year, I told them what my goal was. Kentucky was the king. We wanted to take on the king. It was going to take some time, but believe in the system and believe in me. And if there's anything you don't agree with, come and see me and we'll talk about it. Well, they became known as the Hustlers. They were unbelievable. The first article that came out before the season started said if LSU basketball wins 2 games this year, it'll be the greatest miracle since Lazarus rose from the dead. Well, we won 14 games. We beat, as you mentioned, Memphis State, who was ranked second in the country and played for the national. Take some time to get star players because this was football country. And it just didn't happen. There was no pill, prayer, or prescription. There was just perseverance and belief in what I was doing, trying to help others.
Yeah. To add some context to that question I asked you for our listeners out there, LSU had only had 4 winning seasons in 18 years prior to Coach Brown getting there, and they hadn't been to the NCAA tournament.
You got that perfect. That's exactly right. How'd you know that?
Do more research. Well, I mean, when we were talking last time, I was telling you, I love
that 3-hour conversation we
love
had.
college basketball. That was a history lesson by itself for me, just to sit there listening to you. But then you started to get some stud players in. Things started really heat up in, late 70s, early 80s. Y'all go to the tournament in 79. You get eliminated by Michigan State, who had someone most people have probably heard of, Magic Johnson. They went on to win the national championship. I just thought this was fascinating. 80, y'all go on to lose to Louisville. They go on to win the national championship. And then 81, your LSU team has, an awesome season. Y'all go 31-5, most wins in the nation. The SEC, y'all were 17-1. Y'all go to the Final Four that year. How was that for you, going from coaching high school basketball, sending out these letters to be an assistant coach? Now you're in the Final Four.
Well, it's something. The first time we walked out on the court, first Final Four was 1981 in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked up at the seats where I used to sit, and I thought, you know what? if I can be here coaching in the Final Four, anybody can be here coaching. You just have to have you can't wish things. Everybody wishes they were richer. Everybody wishes they were better looking. Everybody wishes they could win more games. Well, wishing is like belly buttons. Everybody's got one. You don't wish things, you will it. You have to have a goal, and that goal, never ever in having a goal was there ever any personal goal. I wanted to turn LSU into a national power. I wanted to do for young men what sports did for me. My mother and I were abandoned by my biological father 2 days before I was born. He never came back, never wrote, called, never sent us any money. And I wanted to be. I learned how to be a father, and I learned what sports did for me. It gave me the good first self-image of myself. Yeah. It taught me discipline. It taught me teamwork. And then I think one of the things that really taught me, the ex-coach of the school that I went to, the high school, he went to an all-Catholic school called St. Leo's. And he told me, he called me out in the hall. I smarted off to some nun or something, and he was bawling me out. And he was almost kind of pinning me up against the locker. And he said, Dale, you really, man, you got a good future. And then he squeezed the back of my neck. And he said, I love you, Dale. And he took off down the hall. Now I was 17 years old. Yeah. I'm going to be 87. And I still remember that. Wow. The first male that ever told me he loved me. So there was never a player that came through here that I never somehow, some way, told him that I loved him. Also, when I went to recruit, I didn't have a set pattern. I always wanted to recruit a human being first and a basketball player second. And I would look at them and think, and not that you had to be a canonized saint to play ball here or coach, or I'd have never been the coach. But I used to look at players and say, do I want them babysitting our daughter? What kind of people were they, besides their basketball skills? And I was really blessed with some outstanding people. I had 160 young men that played for me here. Those that stayed their 4 years, 80 to 85% of them graduated. Now, those that didn't, some of them came back and got their degrees, such as Shaquille got his doctorate degree, and he left early. But it wasn't a business to me. It was a fun thing, but it started at the end. I saw too many parasites getting involved, wheelers and dealers, crooked agents, people that when they'd say they were the uncle, that meant they were a behind-the-scenes guy looking for a handout. I just didn't like what they were doing, and I did not like an organization called the NCAA. The NCAA, who makes billions of dollars off poor kids, and some kids came to us in battered tennis shoes. You couldn't buy them a pair of normal street shoes. It'd be breaking a rule, etc. The only thing the NCAA did well was they legislated against human dignity, and they practiced monumental hypocrisy. So I continued to see that, and I continued to fight it. And when you fight something and somebody's wrong, then they're going to come up with something to try to scar you, to try to make an Elmer Gantry out of the person that's trying to change the system. Well, then they had some phony investigation that was totally, and it was proven wrong. They intimidated a kid that I had suspended from the team, kicked off the team, and tried to get him to say things about LSU, or you'd lose your eligibility and you'll never play in the pros. He finally wrote a letter to the local paper and said he apologizes to everybody, but I never got an apology from the NCAA, and neither did LSU or its fans.
Are you talking about Lester Earl?
Was creeping in. Pardon me?
Lester Earl?
Yes, it was. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
With all of that creeping in, I thought, you know what? It's not what I used to. I've been in it now 44 years of coaching. I coached 4 years when I was in high school. When I was a college student, I coached the junior varsity at my high school. And so I coached 44 years. I thought, I don't want to be disgruntled. I loved what I was doing, but I didn't like the direction it was going. But I tried my best to make changes. and I sent in 43 recommendations, stupid things you couldn't do. Like if a kid's mother died in California, and most kids come from poor families like I did that played ball. You couldn't get him home for the funeral. He didn't have money to get on an airplane. He didn't have a car to get there. So the NCAA, that's what I say, they legislated against human dignity. But I enjoyed my 44 years coaching career, and I've enjoyed my 25 years of not being a coach. I still talk to my players on a regular basis. I know where almost every one of them are and try to talk to them as periodically as I can.
That's awesome. And one of the things, you kind of got a moniker, the Master Motivator. And especially during like the mid 80s, where you had a couple of years there where LSU, the 86 season, y'all were a lower seed, but you went on to beat Memphis State, Georgia Tech, Kentucky. They were all, top seeds in a tournament. But how did you motivate your team, specifically the 86 team, to go to the Final Four? Y'all had to beat Kentucky, but they had beaten y'all 3 times that season.
And we lost 3 players, one ineligible, one injured, and one suspended. All 3 potential starters, 2 7-footers in that group. I think, again, by this, I told them that now, here's the position we're in. We're down and we're out. Anyone can look good in an inauguration parade. But here we are getting ready to be knocked out. But if you do the following, and it's pretty simple, if you continue to believe in the system that we've got, if you go into every game, and I said, this isn't some motivational speech to fire you up. It's the truth about life. If you go into every game and you play as hard as you can, and only you will know that. If you play as intelligent as you can, and if you play together, if you have the HIT philosophy, HIT, capital all HIT, you'll be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there could be some doubting Thomases because there are some, people that talk the game, some phony evangelists and don't live the game. But I tried to give them an example by me never being down, no matter what it was, or ever publicly criticizing a player. That doesn't mean you don't discipline. That doesn't mean you don't have a bad game. And I just think it's belief. When they believe in themselves, and a lot of these kids, were like me. They grew up in a single-parent home. And I probably was the first male, maybe, in their lives outside of their high school coach, obviously, that they came in communication with that was interested in them. So I think they believed in the system. And I had really good overall kids. Like I said, it sounds a little drippy when I say, when I looked at them and studied them and thought, do I want them babysitting our daughter? Well, I made very few mistakes.
Well,
do I sound perfect enough? I didn't mean it that way.
Well,
I made 1,000 mistakes.
You told me a story that was a very touching story about just the type of character and the type of athlete that you recruited. Tell us the one about Shaquille O'Neal when he was, I believe they were playing the Pacers in the playoffs, or the Lakers were, I believe it was the finals, and someone had come up to you and asked you about if Shaq could call their 6th son.
Well, I will tell you that story. I used to do a lot of motivational speaking. In fact, I've been in 90 countries, all 50 states. COVID, of course, has knocked that down quite a bit. But when I would go speak, invariably, they'd sometimes ask it, open it up for questions. And the question was, tell us what kind of guy Shaquille is. Tell us what kind of player. I'd say, there's so many things I can tell you about Shaquille, and they have nothing to do with the basketball court. They have to do with his heart and the way he was and is. I said, let me give you, if I could just tell you one story about Shaquille O'Neal, let me tell you what it is. I said, I got a call one day from a woman from Indianapolis, and never heard of her before, said she's originally from Louisiana. She has a 9-year-old son that has a cancerous brain tumor, has been operated on. And she said, we don't know. He's kind of in a coma. We don't know if he's going to make it or not. And she said, I saw in the paper that Shaquille is playing here in Indiana. Now, this is the NBA playoffs. This just isn't a season game. This is going to be for who's going to win the NBA title. And she said, Shaquille O'Neal is the hero of my son. She said, is there any way I could give you my cell number and you have him call and I could hold it up to his ear and he could listen to his hero? She said, would you do that? And I told her honestly, I said, ma'am, it's almost going to be impossible because they have scouting reports, they have shooting, they're going to be doing sleeping, they're going to be prepared for the game, they get out there early. But I will call and tell him the story, and I hope he can help. So I called Shaq and told him the story. And when he's going to do something, he'd always say, gotcha, coach. Gotcha, coach. So that was it. So 2 years later, I'm in my favorite restaurant in town, getting ready to eat. This lady walks over to the table. Excuse me, Coach Brown. She said, I'm sure you won't remember me, but she said, 2 years ago, I called you. She said, about my son. I said, are you the lady from Indianapolis? She said, yes. And I said, I remember distinctly. Your son had a cancerous tumor. He was in a coma, and you wanted me to have Shaq call. Did he call? She said, no, he didn't, Coach. He didn't? I said, oh, I'm sorry. No, Coach, she said, he didn't call. But you know what he did? On the game day, he came to the hospital, and she said, he prayed. He told my son jokes. He said he held his hand. My son woke up, and she said, he even ate food, which he hadn't. Shaquille was feeding him. And she said, he stayed there for over an hour. I said, that's the kind of guy Shaquille O'Neal is.
Yeah, and that's an awesome story. And that just goes to show the type of character of student athlete that you were recruiting at your program. And that's good to hear stories about athletes like that. And what did it, question about your career and then one about a mentor before we wrap it up. What did it mean to you to have the court named after you a couple weeks back and they beat Kentucky?
I don't mean this at all to sound humble or modest or anything, but in my entire career, I never, ever, my coaching career in college, I never, ever thought of being the National Coach of the Year. I never, ever thought about being in the College Basketball Hall of Fame. I never thought of ever having a court named after me. It was never, my goals were never that. I wanted to build a national power, and I wanted to have young men graduate, and I wanted them to be able to have a good life when they left here. And so this was all lanyap. It was wonderful. My family, it's a tribute, I think, not to me necessarily. It's a tribute that, hey, a no-name guy from North Dakota that had no connections, went to a small teacher's college, grew up right near the Canadian border in a small town called Minot, about 20,000 people. You don't have to sell your soul to get ahead. And I think that comes. I was recruiting a young, not a young player. He was an older player out of Mongolia. He was 7 feet tall. And there's an old Mongolian piece of wisdom that stuck with me. It said, greed keeps men forever poor. Even the abundance of the world will not make them rich. And so I think of the fact that my goal was never any personal goal. And I'm not trying to sound like Mr. Nice Guy or, oh, isn't that sweet or anything. And I'm not, but I recognize that I'm still a work in progress. I tried to do my very best, and that's all you can do. And I think that nowadays, like John Wooden was my mentor. So if he was the man I wanted to mimic. He was the most greatest coach that ever lived in any sport by far. And I think you can do that. And so many of these young kids didn't have mentors growing up. You know, I don't know what exact percentage there was, single parents, but I'll bet you it was close to 50% of the players that I coached that came out of a single parent home. And so to let them know, now you got to be disciplined too. You can't be just Mr. Nice Guy. They knew when I said the curfew's at this time. If you miss the curfew, you won't play in the game tonight or tomorrow, or whenever the thing was, whenever the game was, a day or 2 days from, you'll be suspended. Well, as long as they know, is what I said from the very beginning of your show, players do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. Now, you can con them and manipulate them and intimidate them, but eventually that's gonna blow up in your face. And so I loved the 44-year career. I did not love the NCAA. I thought, as I said to you, they've made. I'll give them credit.
Mm-hmm.
They've come millions of miles, but they got light years to go, and light travels 186,000 miles a second. So even though they've made some improvements, I compliment them for that. But for the things they didn't do to help young people was just nothing but greed, selfishness. And sports can be used for such a wonderful tool. I mean, let me give you an example. High school I went to, the ex-coach became the principal. And 1 o'clock every Monday, we needed an eligibility slip to turn in. Well, I never had any trouble with eligibility. I didn't have any trouble with studying either. I just went to class and listened. If I got a C, fine. If I got an A, fine. But he was on the phone when I came down Monday and threw my slip on his desk. And I'm going, wait a minute, Dale. So he finished talking to the guy, and he held up my eligibility slip. And he said, what is this, Dale? That's kind of funny. I thought, my eligibility slip, I said. Mm-hmm. What time was this due in the office? And I said, 1 o'clock. He said, what time does it say on that clock on my wall? I said, 1:15. That's good. We've established this. You knew it was your eligibility slip. He said, you knew what time it was due, and you can tell time. So he said, you failed in all of those. So as a result, he started to rip my eligibility slip up in small pieces and throw it in the garbage can. He says, as an example for you, he said, you will not go on this road trip this week. And so I start walking back upstairs. I won't go on this road trip. Who is he kidding? Man, I'm the class president. I'm the leading scorer in the history of North Dakota high school basketball, and we're going on the trip down. We're going down into Lute Olson and Roger Maris country, which are loaded with great players. There's no way I'm not going. Well, when it came time to go, I had my bag standing out in the driveway waiting to get in the car. Guess who stood there with tears in his eyes as they drove off without me? So I figured then, hey, this situation, that taught me, if you were in Baton Rouge and you told me you were going to meet at a restaurant at 3 o'clock, I'm so paranoid about being late. I can promise you I'm going to be there a minimum of 15 minutes to 30 minutes early, just so I'm not late.
Yeah.
So people want to be disciplined, not grabbed by the shirt, not grabbed by the throat, not sworn at, not intimidated, not embarrassed, but they want to be disciplined.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing, I think, my dear friend Bob Richards, who was the Olympic decathlon champion and pole vault champion, Bob Richards, who's still living, by the way, in his mid-90s, he told me years ago when I went up to mentor from him about motivation, he told me years ago, he said, Dale, the thing you have to learn about life to be successful, he said, it's not your IQ that's the most important thing. It's your FQ. And I said, obviously I knew what IQ was, intelligent quotient. Yeah. And I said, well, what do you mean by FQ? Your failure quotient. He said, how much can you take? He said, and if you'll go back and read, which I did, you'll go back and read the most successful people, they've had the most failures, but they've turned that into success. And boy, that's really true. And it's funny because a loss stimulated me more than a victory. I was more determined than ever. We had, and let me close this with telling you a story that almost seems impossible. When I came to LSU, I'd written on the board, LSU had this, as you already mentioned, had 14 out of 18 losing seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody told me, boy, you're making a mistake going there. It's a football country. You'll never win there. So we playing at Kentucky, and they'd beaten Kentucky in a 100-year history. They'd beaten Kentucky once at Kentucky, one time. So I kept on telling the guys, those are the people we're hitting. I wrote on the blackboard at that time. There weren't those boards they use now, the big old chalk you use on a blackboard. Yeah. First meeting I ever had, I said, see that name there, Kentucky? That's who we're after. This is 1972. After a 14 out of 18 years and a no-name guy being the coach, I said, now, if you really believe this, the French call it idée fixée. Whatever you fix in your mind will happen if you will it. That's who we're going to take off after. Well, people scoffed at that. First year we go up there. The average loss, by the way, prior to my arrival on the road against Kentucky was 24 points. We go up there the first year and we lose by 26. We go up there the second year, we lose by 27, 28. We go up there the third year, we lose by 30. We go up there the fourth year, we lose by like 34 points, I believe it was, in the 30s anyway. Now my seniors are done. They've been there 4 years. So I came in the dressing room and I said, hold on before you shower. I said, I apologize to you guys. I said, you believed in me, and I told you we're going to chase Kentucky, and all we've done is get worse. We lose the first year you were here. By that 28, we lose the last year you're here. If you'll listen and believe in what I'm saying, and believe's hard because there's so many charlatans and con artists and phony evangelists, we'll come back up here one day, and I promise you, we'll beat Kentucky on their own home court worse than they beat us today. And I wasn't trying to be the white man's Muhammad Ali. I really felt that. Well, a few years later, on the Kentucky court, Rupp Arena, we gave them the worst defeat in the history of Kentucky basketball in their own arena, 35 points. Now, why? Was I a great coach? Did I have all the X's and O's? Was I this? Was I that? No. I had players that believed in just 2 and 2 is 4. 2 and 2 is not 5. It can never be 3. It's 4. Once they believe you and what you're saying and you come through with it. Now, was I shocked? I wasn't shocked, but I thought to myself, holy mackerel, this finally did come true. And I remember a writer, I don't remember where he was from, at the press conference afterwards. He said, what'd you tell your team afterwards? Well, I knew the team reads newspapers. I know they watch television and listen to the radio. So I can't say I didn't tell them anything or don't tell the media what I told the team. So I told the media what I told the team. Well, one writer, I don't remember where he was from. I don't remember he was from Louisville, Lexington, or Chicago. I don't know where he was from. But I do remember reading his quote. He said, Dale Brown is delusional. He said, he trying to be the white man's Muhammad Ali. He said, making a prediction he'd come back up here and beat him by this much. Well, we did. Now, why? There was no pill, prayer, prescription. You go to a person's heart and he begins to believe it and he believes in the system. It works. One of the reasons we have major problems in this country are politicians who shouldn't be up there like they are. We should have term limits. They're not a team as a result. Now, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm not an independent. I just go vote for who I think is the best. And the choices are not very good. But look at the arguing and complaining they've got. Look at the disruption they've got. And my dear friend Harry Edwards, and this is really true, silence has always been evil's greatest ally. People don't speak up enough against him. So anyway, that story on Kentucky, and then the final thing about Kentucky, sounds like I'm applying for a job or something. I'm telling you all the good things. We beat Kentucky 18 times. No one else has been able to do that. Not because of my coaching prowess, not because of my motivation, because of the fact that I believed in the players and the players believed in me.
Well, sir,
I should say our system, not me.
You had a remarkable career. You know, rightfully so, had the court honored, named after you. But what final words do you have for our listeners?
I think it would be this, that for any people that question, can they be successful? I think if I can be successful, that is the paramount example of anybody can be successful, because I had no credentials. I didn't play Division I basketball. I played NAIA. I never was a head coach in Division I, but I believed in it. I didn't do it for money. I didn't do it for fame. I really did. And today now, as I told you, I'm going to be 87 in October. When I was a 17-year-old kid in high school, I could almost feel like I could cry right now thinking about that ex-coach squeezing the back of my neck and telling me, Dale Brown, you can make something of your life. I love you. So just little tiny things. And how did Muhammad Ali say? Quote, the greatest religion in the world is love.
Mm.
The paramount example of being a coach, John Wooden, coached 27 years at UCLA. The greatest human being I've ever met in my life is John Wooden. And he won 10 national championships. When he retired from UCLA, after 27 years and 10 national championships, you know what his salary was? $32,500.
Jeez.
So we've lost our guidelines, I think.
Well, sir, I can't thank you enough for taking time to do this. I know
Trip,
you have to
I can't thank you for giving me the platform to do it, and for you doing this, having some good.
Well, I'm definitely going to keep in contact with you and start giving you some calls and talking some college basketball with you.
And I've already recommended that you transfer to the Minot Air Force Base in Minot, North Dakota. You've never been there, right?
No, but I have friends there, and I know plenty of people that have been there before.
And you've been praying you didn't get sent there, right?
Not going to say that on the air. No.
Okay.
But we are going to New Orleans pretty soon, though, so I will be in Louisiana.
So, well, make sure you call.
Will do. Absolutely.
And you're doing a good job, Trip, and keep it up. And I hope I didn't dominate this thing with my long speeches, but.
No, it was amazing, sir. Thank you so much for taking time to do this. I'll let you get going. Folks, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Shadows Podcast.
Trip, it's my pleasure. I'd like to say one more thing.
Yes, sir.
John Wooden. People ask me to, and we can close on this. People say, describe John Wooden to me. Well, he was the greatest coach that ever lived, the kindest man, one of the brightest human beings I've ever met, a gentleman, sensitive. But no, that's not enough. The best way I can describe Coach Wooden is Edgar Guest, who happened to be his favorite poet, and I didn't even know who Edgar Guest was at the time, became my favorite poet. We all should leave this conversation today with this in mind. Here's why John Wooden was a great leader. Edgar Guest described him perfectly. Here's what he said. I'd rather see a lesson than to hear one any day. I'd rather you walk with me than to merely show the way. The eye's a better teacher and more willing than the ear, and the counsel you are giving may be very fine and true, but I'd rather get my examples by observing what you do. So any parent, coach, leader that's out there, especially the politicians. The statesmen don't need to hear this. They already know it. But that's the perfect example. John Wooden, he's the beacon light.
And that's a perfect thing to take us out on this episode with, sir. I appreciate that. Well,
okay,
folks.
Triple, thanks for having me, and good job with you. Good job. Good show. It's I sure am glad you didn't ask about how about this game when the guy took a last second shot? I get bored with that. The meat of it's in the heart and soul of a player, and what good can come from sports. And a lot of good can come. And Shaquille's the paramount example. And the reason he had a dad and a mother. The mother was the cement of that family, and a dad that taught them this. I just continued what they already started. So have a good day.
Absolutely. I will keep in contact with you, sir. Folks, check us out next week.